So we are going to be talking in this Behind the Sermon, one of Pastor Steve's recent regrets. So Steve, if you had
One of my regrets.
Let's talk about it. So if you had any regrets with things you didn't get to in your recent sermon this past Sunday you preached, if any, what would it have been?
Oh, okay. So I do have something, and that is that I just touched on, almost like on my feet, it wasn't really planned, just touched on the fact that in the Bible, in the New Testament, we are mainly described as saints, not sinners.
Right.
Like we're almost never directly, maybe never directly called sinners. You believers, you're sinners. No, but 67 times we're called saints. Hagioi is the plural of the word. Holy ones, set apart to God. So what's my identity? Am I a sinner? If I see myself as a sinner, if I look in the mirror and see a sinner, then I'm Eeyore. Oh, I'm just a sinner. What do you expect? I'm a sinner. I sin. That's what I do. But if I'm a saint, that's a whole different identity. And if I look in the mirror and see a saint, just call me Saint Steve and you're Saint Sean, right? If I'm a saint, then that's a whole different identity. And now I want to live like a saint and be like a saint. And thank God I'm a holy one. And I'm holy in Christ even when I do mess up. So very big difference in identities. And I would like to have spent more time on that. 67 of those in the New Testament. But there's another thing that's behind the sermon this week, Sean, and it's not a thing that would have gotten in the sermon, but it was in my week as I was preparing the sermon, so it's kind of behind. Will that qualify?
Yes. Go for it.
Okay, so it was a book I finished and a podcast I listened to, and the author of the book was in the podcast. So the podcast was really interesting. Now and then I watch a Joe Rogan podcast. There's a guy in our church named Tom, and he'll send me, you ought to see this one, you ought to see that one. So this week he sent me one, and it's Joe Rogan and a fellow named Stephen Meyer. Now Stephen Meyer is one of the most brilliant advocates and voices for the intelligent design community on the planet. I just happen to have finished a book by him called The Return of the God Hypothesis, an awesome, awesome book. But Stephen Meyer was on Joe Rogan. It's just amazing. Like, really, how did that happen? And Meyer did a great job, even though Rogan treated him kind of badly. Like, never smiled at him, was never nice to him, was kind of grouchy with him. But anyway, but here you have this guy, Stephen Meyer, explaining why intelligent design is the way to go and why the naturalist cosmology just doesn't work. And it was astounding. He points out these three things especially. There is exquisite, extreme, impossible fine-tuning of the initial conditions of the universe. So that's in the book, but listen to the podcast. There's the exquisite, extreme fine-tuning of the laws and constants of physics, and there's the staggering amount of coded information in DNA, and where did it come from? So you want to get into that? Joe Rogan and Steve Meyer.
Definitely check out that podcast that Steve's repping, and we will see you guys. I'll see you, Steve, on Thursday.
Thanks, Sean.